When I overheard my husband Williams laughing on the phone about how he was only staying married to me to avoid paying child support, he said with smug confidence, "She's too emotional to ever leave." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Too emotional. I, who for 19 years had raised our 3 children, Allegra, Sandra, and Ramsey, practically alone while he treated our family like a financial inconvenience. I, who had cooked every meal, attended every parent-teacher conference, worked double shifts, and held our household together with sheer determination. I was too emotional. I stood there on the staircase of my own house, gripping the banister as if it were the only thing keeping me upright, listening to my husband mock the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. Williams sat in the living room, our living room, the one I had painted 3 times to make it feel like home, bragging to whoever was on that phone about his clever strategy to avoid financial responsibility for his own children. Way cheaper to stay under the same roof than pay for 3 kids. He laughed. Child support would drain me dry. She won't leave anyway. Too soft, too scared, too busy trying to keep the family together. For 19 years, I had believed we were partners. Not perfect, not passionate, but partners. I had cooked his meals while he complained they weren't seasoned right. I had washed his clothes while he left them on the floor like I was his maid. I had listened to his problems while mine went unheard. I had worked myself to exhaustion so our children could have stability, all while he treated fatherhood like an optional hobby he could skip when something better came along. And now I knew the truth. He wasn't staying because he loved me. He wasn't staying because he wanted to fix our marriage. He was staying because divorcing me would cost him money. That night I made dinner like nothing had happened. Spaghetti, garlic bread, salad, the same meal I made every Tuesday because William said it was his favorite. I set the table with the plates we got as wedding gifts, the ones I still used even though half of them were chipped. I called the kids downstairs. Allegra came first, her backpack still on, exhausted from basketball practice. Sandra followed, humming a song she learned in chorus. Ramsey shuffled in last, eyes glued to his tablet. William sat at the head of the table like a king, surveying his kingdom, completely unaware that his queen had just discovered his betrayal. I served his plate first, as I always did. He didn't say thank you. He never did. I watched him eat, laughing at something Ramsey said, pretending to care about Allegra's upcoming game, acting like the devoted father he had never actually been. And I realized something that made my hands tremble as I lifted my fork. I had been living with a stranger, a man who saw me as an expense to avoid rather than a wife to love, a man who calculated the cost of our marriage in spreadsheets while I calculated it in sacrifices. That night, after the dishes were done and the kids were in bed, I lay next to Williams in the darkness. He was already snoring, completely at peace, while my mind raced with questions I should have asked years ago. When did he stop loving me? Had he ever loved me? Or had I always been just the convenient option, the woman who would cook, clean, raise his children, and never demand more than the bare minimum? But something inside me that night was different. The tears I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt something colder, harder, sharper, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't going to cry myself to sleep anymore. I wasn't going to beg him to notice me, appreciate me, love me. I wasn't going to spend another decade hoping he would change. I was going to do something Williams never expected from his too emotional wife. I was going to win. When I woke up the next morning, Williams was already gone. He left before dawn for work, or whatever he was actually doing with his time. A year ago, I would have worried. Called to make sure he ate breakfast. Texted to ask when he'd be home. This morning, I didn't care. I got up and made breakfast for the kids. Pancakes for Ramsey because he had a math test. Scrambled eggs for Sandra because she was trying to eat more protein. a smoothie for Allegra because she had early practice. 3 different meals because that's what mothers do. That's what I had always done. Williams had never made breakfast for them, not once in 19 years. After the kids left for school, I sat at the kitchen table where I had planned so many birthday parties, written so many grocery lists, paid so many bills while Williams complained we didn't have enough money for his golf membership. This table had witnessed every stage of my marriage, the hopeful beginning, the slow decline, the lonely middle, and now the strategic end. I pulled out my phone and searched for something I never thought I would need: a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney. I needed someone who specialized in cases like mine, someone who knew how to deal with men who hid money, who played victim, who underestimated their wives. I needed a warrior, not a mediator. I found her within an hour. Rebecca Hartman, 5-star reviews, specializes in high-conflict divorce and custody cases, known for destroying manipulative husbands in court. Her tagline read, "When nice doesn't work anymore." I called her office. My hands shook as I dialed, but my voice was steady. "I need a consultation," I told the receptionist. "My husband is using our marriage to avoid child support, and I need to make sure he pays for more than he ever tried to avoid." The receptionist paused, then said warmly, "Mrs. Knowles, Rebecca is going to love working with you. How does tomorrow at 10 a.m. sound?" I hung up and looked around my kitchen. The kitchen where I had spent thousands of hours cooking for a man who saw me as a financial strategy, where I had cried silently while doing dishes, where I had convinced myself that staying was strength when it was actually surrender. Tomorrow, everything would change. But today, I had work to do. I opened my laptop and began searching through our joint bank account, the one Williams thought I never checked because I was too emotional to understand finances. I scrolled through months of transactions, looking for anything unusual, and I found it. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize. $800. Then another one the next month. And another. Williams was hiding money. My too emotional, too soft, too weak husband was about to learn that the woman he underestimated had been paying attention all along. I screenshot every transaction, saved every receipt, documented every lie. When Williams came home that evening, I greeted him with a smile. I asked about his day. I served him dinner. I played the role of the devoted wife he expected. But inside, I was building a case. And Williams Knowles had no idea his entire world was about to collapse. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Williams was still snoring beside me, completely oblivious, his arms sprawled across my side of the bed like he owned every inch of space. A week ago, I would have gently moved it. Today, I pushed it off without hesitation. He didn't even stir. I went downstairs and started the coffee maker. While it brewed, I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, bacon. The same breakfast Williams ate every morning while scrolling through his phone, never once asking if I had slept well or if I needed anything. When he finally came down, he grunted something that resembled "good morning" and sat at the table. I smiled. "Coffee's ready. I made it strong, just how you like it." He looked up, surprised. "Thanks." It was pathetic how easy it was to please him. A smile, hot coffee, breakfast on the table. That's all it took for Williams to believe everything was normal. But nothing was normal. I was studying him now, watching, learning. I noticed how he checked his phone constantly, tilting the screen away from me, how he laughed at messages I wasn't supposed to see, how he claimed he had meetings that ran late, but never mentioned who attended or what they discussed. I packed Ramsey's lunch while Williams told some pointless story about his coworker. I laughed at the punchline even though it wasn't funny. He grinned, satisfied, thinking I was still the same woman who hung on his every word. Internally, I was ice. That afternoon, after the kids left for school and Williams went to work, I locked myself in the bathroom. I turned on the shower so no one could hear me if they came home early. Then I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the woman staring back at me. She looked tired, older than she should, but there was something new in her eyes. Determination. I whispered to my reflection, "Prepare. Don't explode. Strategize." I spent the next 2 hours going through our financial records, old tax returns, bank statements I had signed without reading because I trusted him, credit card bills with charges I didn't recognize. Then I found it buried in a document from 3 years ago, a second account, one Williams never mentioned, one that showed regular transfers of $500, sometimes $800, every single month. Money disappearing into thin air. My hands trembled as I took screenshots. I saved everything to a hidden folder on my laptop. I emailed copies to myself using an account Williams didn't know existed. The seed of suspicion I had planted the night before was growing into something bigger, something darker. Williams thought he was so clever, thought I was too emotional, too distracted, too busy raising his children to notice he was robbing us blind. He was wrong. When Williams came home that evening, I greeted him at the door with a smile he didn't deserve. "How was your day, honey?" He kissed my cheek absently. "Long. What's for dinner?" "Your favorite," I said sweetly. "Pot roast." He didn't notice the coldness behind my eyes. He didn't notice that I was no longer the woman he married. I was the woman who was going to destroy him. Rebecca Hartman's office was on the 10th floor of a sleek downtown building that screamed success. The receptionist offered me water, tea, coffee, anything to make me comfortable. I chose water because my hands were already shaking enough without caffeine. When Rebecca walked into the conference room, I understood immediately why Williams would have nightmares about a woman like her. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle she cared about winning. "Mrs. Knowles," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the phone call I overheard, about Williams bragging that staying married was cheaper than paying child support, about how he called me too emotional to ever leave. I told her about the hidden bank account, the mysterious transfers, the late-night work meetings that never seemed to involve actual work. I told her about 19 years of cooking meals he barely tasted, attending school events alone, and raising 3 children while their father treated fatherhood like an optional subscription he could cancel any time. Rebecca listened without interrupting. She took notes, and when I finally finished, exhausted from reliving my own humiliation, she smiled slowly. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who just spotted prey. "Velma," she said, leaning forward, "your husband thinks you're weak, that you're too emotional, too soft, too dependent to ever challenge him." I nodded, feeling the familiar sting of those words. "That," Rebecca continued, "is your greatest advantage. Let him keep thinking it." For the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten: hope. Rebecca pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go home and act like nothing has changed. You'll smile. You'll cook. You'll play the role of the devoted wife he expects." I nodded. "Meanwhile, you'll gather evidence. Quietly. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, phone records, anything that shows financial deception. I also need you to document every moment of parental absence, every missed basketball game, every forgotten school event, every broken promise." She looked up at me with steel in her eyes. "We're going to build a case so airtight that when we walk into that courtroom, Williams won't know what hit him. By the time we're done, he'll wish he had just paid the child support." I left Rebecca's office an hour later, walking to my car in a daze. But it wasn't fear that made my hands shake as I gripped the steering wheel. It was purpose. For 19 years, I had fought alone, fighting to keep my marriage together, fighting to make Williams care, fighting to convince myself that love was supposed to feel this exhausting. Now, I wasn't alone anymore. I had a plan, a team, a weapon, and Williams Knowles had no idea what was coming. I became a detective in my own marriage. Every morning after Williams left for work and the kids went to school, I transformed our bedroom into an investigation headquarters. I pulled out old bank statements from the filing cabinet Williams thought I never touched. I logged into accounts using passwords he didn't know I had memorized. The first thing I found was the jewelry store charge. $1,200 at Hartwell & Co., a boutique downtown that sold custom pieces. I had never received jewelry from Williams, not for our anniversary, not for my birthday, not even for Christmas. So who did? I kept digging. Hotel charges, the Riverside Inn, the Grand Plaza, the Marriott on 5th Street, all within 30 miles of our house, all on nights Williams claimed he was working late or attending conferences. Money transfers to a number I didn't recognize. $300 here, $500 there. Always round numbers, always on Fridays. I wrote everything down in a notebook I kept hidden in a box of old holiday decorations Williams never touched. Dates, amounts, locations, lies. Then I started asking the kids questions, casual ones, the kind that wouldn't raise suspicion. "Hey, Allegra, did Dad make it to your game last week?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Mom, he hasn't been to a game all season." "Sandra, didn't you say Dad promised to help with your science project?" She shrugged. "He said he would, but he never did. Mr. Chen let me turn it in late." "Ramsey, buddy, when's the last time Dad took you anywhere?" "Just the two of you?" Ramsey thought hard. "I don't remember." Each answer was another nail in William's coffin. But nothing prepared me for what I found on a Wednesday afternoon while Williams was supposedly in a client meeting. I opened his laptop, the one he sometimes left at home when he took his work tablet instead. I knew his password because he used the same one for everything, our wedding date. The irony wasn't lost on me. I searched his browsing history, and there it was. Dating profiles. 3 of them, on different sites. Elite singles, match, plenty of fish. His profile picture on one was from our vacation to the beach last summer. Allegra and Sandra had been cropped out. His bio read, "Separated but stuck for now. Looking for someone who understands complicated situations." Separated. We weren't separated. We were living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, eating meals at the same table. He was advertising himself as single while I was home raising his children. My hands moved on autopilot. Screenshot, save, screenshot, save. I copied everything to a USB drive I bought specifically for this purpose. I printed copies and locked them in a folder I hid under our bed, beneath boxes of winter clothes Williams never looked at. Each discovery stripped away another layer of the illusion I had been living in. Williams wasn't staying to protect our family. He wasn't staying because he loved me. He was staying because leaving would cost him money. And while he waited for a cheaper exit strategy, he was already living like a single man. I started keeping a journal. Not for me, for the courtroom. Every time Williams missed something, I wrote it down. Date, time, event, his excuse. March 12th, Allegra's championship basketball game. Williams promised he'd be there. Seat next to me stayed empty. Allegra looked for him in the stands during halftime. I watched her face fall when she couldn't find him. His excuse later, traffic was terrible. March 19th, parent-teacher conference for Sandra. Teachers asked where Mr. Knowles was. I smiled and said he was working. They nodded sympathetically, but I saw the look in their eyes. They'd seen absent fathers before. March 24th, Ramsey's birthday. Williams promised to take him to the arcade after school. Ramsey waited by the window for 2 hours. Williams came home at 9 p.m., claiming he forgot about an important meeting. Ramsey went to bed without saying goodnight to him. April 2nd, Allegra's spring concert. Empty seat beside me again. April 8th. Williams didn't come home at all. Claimed he had to stay overnight for work. I found a hotel charge on our credit card the next day. The hotel was 15 minutes from our house. I documented everything in neat handwriting, storing the journal in the locked folder under my bed alongside the dating profiles and bank statements. But I also did something more important. I showed up. I went to every game, every concert, every school event. I cheered louder than any other parent. I took pictures. I made sure my children knew that even if their father didn't care, their mother would never stop caring. One night, after Williams claimed he had another late meeting, I made hot chocolate and sat with the kids in the living room. Allegra spoke first, staring into her mug. "Mom, does Dad even like us?" My heart broke. "Of course he does, sweetheart." She looked up at me with eyes too old for 14. "Then why doesn't he show up?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like a lie. Sandra spoke next, quieter. "I stopped telling him about my stuff. It's easier than being disappointed." Ramsey, my baby, climbed into my lap even though he was getting too big for it. He whispered against my shoulder, "Mom, are you okay?" I held him tighter and smiled a real smile this time. "I'm better than I've ever been." And I meant it. Because while Williams thought everything was normal, thought I was still the obedient wife who would never question him, I was building a fortress of evidence around him. Every missed game was documented. Every broken promise was recorded. Every lie was cataloged. Williams walked through our house like a king, completely unaware that his queen was dismantling his kingdom brick by brick. He had no idea the walls were closing in. But soon, very soon, he would. I chose a Wednesday morning. The kids had already left for school. Williams was eating his usual breakfast cereal, toast, orange juice, scrolling through his phone like every other morning for the past 19 years. I walked to the table carrying an envelope. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I placed the envelope directly in front of his cereal bowl. He glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "What's this?" "Open it." Something in my tone made him put down his phone. He opened the envelope slowly, pulling out the papers inside. I watched his face as he read the first line. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." His spoon dropped into his cereal bowl with a splash. Milk splattered across the table. "Velma." His voice cracked. "What? Why would you do this?" I said nothing. Silence, Rebecca taught me, is the most powerful weapon. "We're fixing things." His voice rose, desperate now. "We've been doing better. You can't do this." I remained perfectly still, my eyes locked on his. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "This is insane. You're being emotional. Impulsive. You're not thinking clearly." There it was. The word he always used to dismiss me. Emotional. "Do you realize what you're doing to this family?" He continued, pacing now. "To the kids? You're ruining everything we built." I almost laughed. Everything we built. As if he had contributed anything beyond his last name and 3 loads of DNA. When I still didn't respond, his panic shifted. He came around the table, reaching for my hands. "Velma, please. Don't do this. I know I haven't been perfect, but we can fix this. I'll be better. I'll come home earlier. I'll spend more time with the kids. Just, please. Don't throw away 19 years. I pulled my hands away. His desperation morphed into anger. His face flushed red. "You think you can beat me? You think any judge will believe your lies? I'm the one who pays for this house? I'm the one with the career. You think you'll get anything?" I stood up slowly, calmly, and looked him directly in the eyes. "I don't think, Williams, I know." His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in our marriage, he had nothing to say. I picked up my coffee mug and walked to the sink. "My attorney will be in touch. You should probably get one too, a good one. Velma." "I kept the receipts," I said without turning around. "The bank statements, the hotel charges, the dating profiles, all of it." The silence behind me was deafening. When I finally turned around, Williams was still standing by the table, the divorce papers clutched in his shaking hands, his face the color of old newspaper. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had just realized he underestimated his opponent. And the game was already over. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, cold, sterile, the kind of place where lives were dissected under fluorescent lights. Williams sat across the aisle with his attorney, a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he charged by the hour and delivered half the value. Williams wore his best shirt and his concerned father expression, the one he practiced in mirrors but never actually used at home. His attorney stood first, painting me as the villain in our story. "Your Honor, Mrs. Knowles is acting irrationally, driven by emotions rather than facts. My client has been a devoted husband and father for 19 years. This sudden filing for divorce is impulsive and vindictive. She's attempting to alienate him from his children and drain his finances." I sat perfectly still. Rebecca had prepared me for this. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She stood slowly, deliberately, and smiled at the judge. "Your Honor, Mrs. Knowles isn't emotional. She's informed." Rebecca opened her briefcase like a magician, revealing her final trick. "Let's start with Exhibit A, Mr. Knowles' dating profiles on 3 separate websites, all created while he was legally married and living with his wife." She projected the screenshots onto the courtroom screen. William's face from our family beach vacation stared back at everyone, separated, but stuck for now. Williams shifted in his seat. Exhibit B, bank statements showing a hidden account Mrs. Knowles knew nothing about, containing $47,000 in undisclosed assets. Gasps from the gallery. Williams' lawyer looked at his client, confused. Exhibit C, hotel receipts, the Riverside Inn, March 3rd, the Grand Plaza, March 17th, the Marriott, March 29th. All within 30 miles of the family home, all on nights Mr. Really Ninth. Knowles claimed he was working late. Exhibit D, jewelry store purchases totaling $3,800, none of which Mrs. Knowles ever received. Rebecca paused, letting each piece of evidence sink in. "And finally, Your Honor, documentation of Mr. Knowles' absence as a father, missed basketball games, forgotten birthdays. 0 attendance at parent-teacher conferences in the last 2 years. Then Rebecca called the children. Allegra took the stand first, tears streaming down her face. "He promised he'd come to my championship game. I kept looking for him in the stands. He never showed up." Sandra spoke next, her voice steady but broken. "He said he'd help with my science project. He never did. He says a lot of things he doesn't mean." Ramsey, my baby, whispered into the microphone. "He's never there. Not really." I watched William's face crumble. His lawyer tried objecting, tried redirecting, tried salvaging something from the wreckage, but there was nothing left to salvage. The judge looked at Williams with the kind of disgust reserved for men who abandon their children while pretending to be fathers. Williams tried to speak. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out but broken excuses that sounded like lies even to his own ears. The courtroom had turned against him, and he knew it. The judge removed her glasses and looked directly at Williams. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. "Mr. Knowles," she began, her voice sharp enough to cut steel, I have presided over family court for 17 years. In that time, I have seen many men attempt to manipulate the system. But rarely have I seen someone so brazenly dishonest while pretending to be a devoted family man. Williams opened his mouth. The judge raised her hand. I'm not finished. He closed his mouth. Based on the evidence presented, the hidden assets, the infidelity, the documented parental neglect, and the fraudulent misrepresentation of marital status, this court rules as follows. My heart pounded as she read from her notes. Mrs. Velma Knowles is granted full physical and legal custody of the minor children, Allegra, Sandra, and Ramsey Knowles. William's face went white. Mrs. Knowles will retain the family home and all assets acquired during the marriage. His lawyer whispered something urgent in his ear. Williams shook his head violently. Mr. Knowles will pay child support in the amount of $2,800 per month until each child reaches the age of 18. I did the math instantly. 3 children. Years of payments. Over $200,000. Additionally, Mr. Knowles will pay spousal support in the amount of $1,500 per month for a period of 7 years. Another $126,000. Furthermore, due to the undisclosed assets totaling $47,000, Mr. Knowles will be subject to penalties and full financial disclosure audits. Mrs. Knowles is entitled to 50% of all hidden assets, plus legal fees incurred during discovery. The judge looked up from her notes, her expression cold. Mr. Knowles, you attempted to avoid financial responsibility by remaining in a marriage you had already abandoned emotionally. Your deception has resulted in far greater consequences than honest divorce proceedings would have. Williams exploded. This is insane! He shot to his feet, pointing at me. She tricked me. She manipulated everything. This whole thing is a setup. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Knowles, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. His lawyer pulled him back into his chair, but Williams kept shouting, You can't do this. She's lying. She... One more word and you'll spend the night in jail. Do you understand me? Williams finally went silent, his chest heaving, his face red with rage and humiliation. Rebecca leaned close to me and whispered, He refused to divorce you to save money, and because of that, he lost far more. I looked across the aisle at the man who had called me too emotional to leave, the man who had mocked my loyalty, the man who had stayed married to me only because he thought it was cheaper than child support. Now he would pay child support, spousal support, penalties, and legal fees. The irony didn't just taste sweet, it tasted like justice. The house felt different after Williams left, lighter somehow, as if his presence had been weighing down the walls themselves. I walked through rooms that were finally, truly mine. The kitchen, where I had cooked thousands of meals out of obligation, now became a place I cooked for pleasure. I tried new recipes, experimented with spices Williams never liked, made cookies with Ramsey just because we wanted to, not because anyone expected it. The bills came, and I paid them without fear, without checking over my shoulder, without wondering if Williams had drained our account for another hotel room or another piece of jewelry for a woman whose name I'd never know. My money was mine, my home was mine, my life was mine. The children noticed the change too. Allegra smiled more. She invited friends over without asking permission 3 times. Sandra sang louder, filling the house with music instead of tiptoeing around her father's moods. Ramsey stopped asking if Daddy was coming home soon. One Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk, not to run errands, not to pick up groceries, just to walk, just to breathe. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned when Williams complained about the smell of acrylics. I joined a book club. I took myself to lunch at the cafe downtown and didn't feel guilty about spending money on myself. I learned what it felt like to live instead of just survive. One evening, I sat on the porch watching Allegra teach Ramsey how to shoot baskets in the driveway while Sandra practiced her guitar inside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I whispered to myself, to the universe, to the woman I used to be, never again. Never again would I shrink myself to make a man feel bigger. Never again would I mistake loneliness for love. Never again would I let anyone convince me that my emotions made me weak. I didn't just win a divorce. I reclaimed my dignity, my confidence, my freedom. The bright future I thought I'd lost was waiting for me all along. I just had to be brave enough to reach for it. Williams thought I was too emotional to leave, too weak to fight, too soft to win. He was wrong about everything. And I had never been more right in my life. What did you think of Velma's story? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone underestimated you? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your own stories of reclaiming your power. And if Velma's journey inspired you, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves.